Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Azure Infrastructure Update. It's the 20th of June. Actually a quite nice selection of new updates this week. And as always, if this is useful, please like, subscribe, comment and share and hit that bell icon. New videos. So I actually released a little video just about creating your own content. People have asked me for kind of guidance about, hey, what are the things you think about? And I don't consider myself an expert, but I created a little video of the key things I think about. So maybe that will help. Then I did kind of a deep dive on access reviews, thinking about how can I review the access for group memberships, for app assignments, for role assignments, for users, for guests, even service principals. So that's going to help like with various security certifications. And then a deep dive into actually using the Azure pricing calculator, but really a focus on what I need to know beforehand, then really getting the most out of that tool. So on compute side, VMSS OS image upgrade now supports maintenance control. So one of the things I can actually turn on VM scale sets is it's based off of either kind of one of the built-in images, i.e. from the marketplace, the OS platform images, or it could be my custom image in my shared image gallery. And what we can do via a switch is if there's a new version of that image, it automatically rolls out in that VM scale set. What I can now do, in addition to the general safe deployment practices where it's kind of AZ by AZ, it checks a certain amount of success, I can now create a maintenance control associated with the virtual machine scale set, and it will adhere to that. So super quickly, if I just go and look in this subscription, if I was to actually just search for my maintenance configurations, what we need to do is create a maintenance configuration that's at least 5 hours in duration and is daily. So here, I'm not actually going to go ahead and create this, but I can kind of, you want to give it something useful. So maybe it's 6 hour daily, must be a let one number, 6 hour daily, whatever you're going to do. And what is my scope? So my scope here is not like dedicated host. It's not an isolated VM. It's for OS image upgrade of a VM scale set. And then I set my schedule. So 12 a.m. midnight, at least 5 hours. Maybe I'll give it more. I could say it's 6 hours. I can optionally set an end for this. But then I would assign it to a particular VM scale set that has that switch turned on to actually do that automatic OS upgrade. So now I can go ahead, I can create those, and it's going to be used for that virtual machine scale set automated rollout. And again, it is rolled out, it's not all at once, so my overall solution on that scale set would still be available during that rollout. The DCS v2 is now available in Australia. Remember, this is part of the confidential computing SKUs. They're using the Intel SGX to have those secure compute enclaves. So even when the CPU is doing operations, the data is still encrypted even in the CPU. So I write my application to use that confidential enclave to ensure my data is always encrypted, even when it's actually going through operations in the processor. And then Azure Backup CRR is now available for SQL Server and SAP HANA databases running in a VM. So this is cross-region restore. If I think about Azure Backup, I back up to a recovery services vault, and I can have kind of geo-replication. So the Azure paired regions, that backup is also available in the paired region. What cross-region restore enables me to do is on that replicated region, I can perform that restore into that paired region. It was always available for virtual machines. Now it's also available for my SQL Server and SAP HANA databases in VMs as well. So now I could actually restore them directly into the paired region from the replicated copy of the backup recovery vault. Networking, nothing this week. Storage. So ADLS Gen 2 now has static website in GA. So if we remember, what is ADLS Gen 2? Well, it's an Azure storage account that has hierarchical namespace enabled. We set it when we create the storage account. That gives us the ability to actually have true folders as opposed to just virtual directories by nature of the name in a blob. gives us POSIX style ACLs and more. Static website has been available for Blob for a while. It creates a $web folder. I put content in. It's available as a website. Well, now we can do it on our data lake as well. So if I jump over to my data lake, and I can just go to a storage account. So again, it's a storage account. When you create it, remember you set, if I look at my advanced flags, enable hierarchical namespace. That's what makes it a data lake. So I don't have regular blobs. Well, it is blobs underneath, but it's actually shown as this true hierarchical namespace where I have folders, etc. So if I created my storage account with that, now it's a data lake. So here's my data lake. Here I can look at my containers, for example, and you see I have this $web folder. Into that folder, I can just copy content. I have a basic index file, an error file, and a really basic little GIF. Now that $web container was created automatically because if I actually go to my data management section, I have static website. In there, I just say, hey, it's enabled, and it tells me the URL that it's going to be available as, and then, hey, what is my default index and error? So I clicked enable. Again, this is in my data lake. If I looked at the configuration, it's going to show me, hey, yes, this hierarchical namespace is enabled. So now if I go to that URL, there's my really boring, not very good website. And I created that spinning logo, I think, when I was about 20 years old, so long, long ago. But now I can host that static website in a data lake as well. So that is now GA'd. Don't forget as well, there's also static web apps plans now as part of kind of like an app service, which is geographically distributed. I've talked about that in other updates. Azure Blob index tags have also gone GA. So if I actually jump back to the same configuration, but I'm actually going to look at a different storage account, Blob index tags are metadata I can configure on my blobs. So if I go and look at my containers, I look at my images, and I look at my Ollie and Eddie cereal eating, if I actually go and look at the properties, we'll see down here at the bottom, we're looking at this. We can see we have Blob index tags, and I've added one. It's a key value pair. I've added it project JL. So these are not tags on the ARM resource. This is not metadata. This is Blob index tags. It's very specific. I can set these after it's been uploaded. I can set it during the upload. And these are getting more and more used. For example, I've talked about attribute-based access control in the past. This is where, hey, look, I can now give data plane roles, for example, let's say Blob data reader, but instead of just giving it, I can actually set additional conditions. In this case, you can see, well, hey, I'm looking for a particular Blob index tag called project, and it has to be equal to JL. I would have access to that image I just showed. And I did a whole video on attribute-based access control. You can go and check that out. So it's used here, those index tags, to help me control permissions. It's also used as things like lifecycle management. So lifecycle management lets me do things like, hey, move between tiers, delete content. Well, as part of the rules I create, I can say, hey, limit blobs with filters. I'll give it an age, but what I really care about is the filter set. So here I could actually enter the key, and I could say it has to equal a value like what I just set, or maybe I can do other combinations of things there. So that's a key point. I can now actually go and filter using those blob index tags as well. So they really do give me a lot of capabilities in addition to just letting me be able to search on them, filter on them. So this is a pretty huge capability that's just going to get used more and more. But again, it's not the ARM tag, it's those specific blob image index tags I set when I upload or after it's already there. Miscellaneous. So the Azure Monitor agent and the whole data collection rules have gone GA. So remember, the Azure Monitor agent is kind of the replacement, the evolution of the Log Analytics agent, the VM Diagnostics extension, the Telegraph extension that lets me get data not only into Log Analytics, but also things like Azure Monitor metrics. So that has gone GA. Now I can use those data collection rules, and I'll do a deeper dive video on this soon, to say, hey, this is what I want to capture from Windows or from Linux. I want performance counters, I want certain logs, and then where do I want to send it to? Log Analytics, Azure Monitor metrics, and I can have multiple of those rule sets apply to different machines, and each machine will send the sum of the rules to the various targets that are specified. So it gives me a lot of flexibility. So that is now there. In the future, it's going to add support for things like Event Hub, storage accounts, and more. But today, it's really just Log Analytics workspaces and Azure Monitor metrics. And the Azure Monitor metrics is still in preview as a target. West US 3 in Arizona is available. So a new region, really all about renewable energy. It's using a lot of solar power. It's using the outside air temperature for cooling if it's 85 degrees or less. If it's not, then it uses kind of the swamp cooler type cooling. So it's a minimal amount of water, and it uses that to cool the data center. So it's really trying to be really environmentally friendly. So that's now available for you. And of course, it supports availability zones. Windows 10 has a retirement date. And I'm sure you've seen this in the press already. But obviously, this means something else is coming. So we always kind of heard Windows 10 was the last version of Windows. Well, clearly, nothing is last forever. So something else is coming. So there is a retirement date for this. And we can see it's the 14th of October 2025, which I think would be just shy of its 10th anniversary, or just after its 10th anniversary. So something is coming. And there's kind of been leaks and screenshots. You've probably seen those, kind of a new interface. So there's an event next week that actually is going to start showing some of this off. So that'd be interesting. Windows Virtual Desktop was rebranded to Azure Virtual Desktop. Now, there's a number of new features coming as part of that announcement. For example, today you have to join the machines to Active Directory domain services like the old style AD. Well, what's coming is I can actually join them to Azure AD. Now, be aware, some other services will still want a line of sight to a domain controller. They will still use kind of a Kerberos. For example, FS Logics on Azure Files, well, that integrates with AD. So even though the machine might not be joined to AD, it still needs line of sight to a domain controller. They're adding a new onboarding experience to make it simpler to actually onboard. I know the Microsoft Endpoint Manager will now be able to manage the multi-session Windows 10. Remember, the Microsoft Endpoint Manager is kind of that merging of Intune and Configuration Manager. And also, if I have users outside of my company, because today I kind of licensed it based on I have rights to Windows 10 Enterprise, for example. What they're adding is a per user licensing option for external users. So now maybe I can have app streaming to people outside my company. Maybe I'm a provider of the service. Well, now I can actually license that on a per user basis. So all those things are coming. Microsoft Graph 1.6 PowerShell SDK was released. And what's cool about this? The whole Azure AD management from PowerShell has been in flux. There's an Azure AD module, an Azure AD preview module. This is the direction. So the Microsoft.Graph and the Graph overall RESTful API is the future for Azure AD management. It works on PowerShell 5, PowerShell 7. This is how we will actually manage Azure AD going forward. Again, I'm going to do a deeper dive on this, but I have the whole idea of I kind of do a connect-mg graph to connect, and then I can do things like get-mg, management graph user, group, application, etc. So this is how you manage Azure AD. They have this PowerShell module that sits on top of the Microsoft Graph API. So that's the answer to how do we manage Azure AD with PowerShell. It's this. And there's actually a new Azure Private Mech announcement. This is actually a pretty big announcement. And you might wonder what this is. So this is all about multi-access edge compute, Mech. And if we think about Azure, there's a whole bunch of services, okay? So we have kind of Azure. And that kind of lives out there, and that's what we kind of always think about as Azure. And they're in certain big regions. And obviously there's the big Microsoft backbone network. Then they have various kind of points of presence locations. And what they started to release is they had these Azure Edge zones. So these are still managed by Microsoft, and they would have a subset of services. But the point is these will maybe closer to certain metro regions, so I can get it closer to my actual workloads. But then I think about, well, there's my location. When we think about Azure on-premises, we talk about things like Azure Stack Hub, Azure Stack Edge, Azure Stack HCI. Well, when we think what this MEC is, so that's where this service plays. But it's all about the idea that on my location, maybe it's a factory, some kind of industry, a retail store, I have devices and I want private wireless. So the whole goal is I want kind of this private wireless capability, for example, private 5G, private LTE. But I still want Azure services running locally. So what this is basically doing is I can think about, hey, we have that familiar Azure Stack Edge. And remember, with Azure Stack Edge, it's managed from Azure. So I have Azure services like, hey, I can have virtual machines, I can have containers, and those can be managed by things like, well, hey, Kubernetes and IoT Edge, which can get things pushed from IoT Hub. So I can run those on the Azure Stack Edge. Now the Azure Stack Edge Pro also has things like network accelerated ports, SRIOV. So the point is now, connected to this, I can add various types of access point. So if I think about, I want to do an access cell to give me private 5G or private LTE, I have one of those devices. Well, so we have the Azure Stack Edge Pro with these access points connected to it. There's different types of access cell depending on the range and environment I have. That now gives me local kind of maybe private 5G or LTE being broadcast out. But then I need a virtual function, a network virtual function that actually provides this capability to actually understand the packet core service. So to work with these access points, I need a packet core service. And that is built as a virtual function. So the other part of MEC, and this is kind of the cool part, obviously Azure has a marketplace. So what we're going to see is, as part of this announcement, there's also now this Azure Network Function Manager. So through the marketplace, I can say, hey, I want this network function. And what it's actually going to do is, in my subscription, it's going to deploy into a resource group. But it's actually deploying as a managed Azure application. And what's special about this is that because it's now using this actual managed application, the vendor of whatever offering I did, so there's kind of a vendor sitting here, that vendor actually gets ongoing management access to that resource group. So they're going to manage and maintain it on my behalf. So I don't have to worry about that ongoing kind of care and feeding. So whichever vendor had this virtual network function in the marketplace, they get access to that resource group. And this has the VNF kind of definition, but it's going to deploy it and run it on my Azure Stack Edge Pro. In addition, hey, I can run various other Azure services, because what's it going to do? Well, Azure Arc, which brings the Azure Management Plane and other data services and machine learning services and app services, runs on any CNCF compatible Kubernetes environment. So now I can have this environment running on premises. So if I have this requirement, I want private wireless, using the Azure Stack Edge Pro, having the access point, using this virtual network functions, which is really click and deploy now, it will land in my environment and I can still use all those other Azure services to work with it and bring that close to my environment. Remember, the Edge Pro has like GPUs, it has FPGAs, so I can do things like cognitive services, image inference. I can make decisions locally before I send things to the cloud. If there's PII, I could maybe blur people's faces out before I send it up to the cloud. So I can do a ton of really cool things. But basically, hey, I want private wireless solutions. Now it's kind of this all-in-one, merging with Azure, making it super simple to go and deploy, and a whole bunch of different partners actually going to be part of this. You can actually go and search the marketplace right now for, like, for example, Solana is shown in there, and it will deploy a virtual network function. So that's what kind of the mech is all about. Hey, I want private wireless and Azure services managed through Azure, but running in my environment. And obviously there's partner hardware. If I'm doing 5G, there's going to be SIMs involved and these access points. It all kind of comes together. So hopefully that makes sense what that kind of mech announcement was all about. And that was it. So again, some cool stuff there. I hope that was useful. Next week, I'm going to be at Ironman Coeur d'Alene. So if you're in Idaho and you're around there, I'll still be doing the update, but once again, it'll be me in a hotel room doing the best I can. But until next week, take care.